happens when one of the biggest pop stars in the world sits down for what should be a routine late-night interview, only to find herself facing the most hostile questioning of her career. What you're about to hear is the real story behind Jennifer Lopez's explosive walkout from The Late Show with Stephen Colbert, a confrontation so intense that it left the studio audience in stunned silence and producers scrambling to salvage the rest of the taping. This was the moment when Hollywood politeness crumbled and two massive egos collided in spectacular fashion. The tension had been building from the moment Jennifer Lopez walked onto the stage. What should have been a celebration of her latest project quickly turned into something much darker. Colbert, known for his sharp wit and political edge, seemed determined to press buttons most hosts wouldn't dare touch. The studio lights were hot, the audience was primed for entertainment, but no one could have predicted the verbal warfare that was about to unfold. "Jennifer, welcome back to the show," Colbert began with his trademark grin, though there was something different in his tone, something that hinted this wouldn't be the typical celebrity softball interview. "I have to say, it's interesting timing for you to be here promoting your new album, when there's been so much discussion about authenticity in the entertainment industry." Lopez, radiant in a silver dress, smiled graciously, but her eyes flickered with a hint of weariness. "Thank you for having me, Stephen. I'm excited to talk about the music and everything we've been working on." "Oh, we'll get to that," Colbert replied, leaning back in his chair with a look that felt almost predatory. "But first, I think our audience would love to hear your thoughts on the recent conversations around manufactured personas in pop music, the idea that some artists are more brand than actual artist." The question hit like a slap. The audience shifted uncomfortably, sensing the shift in tone. Lopez's smile tightened ever so slightly, but her media training kicked in. "I think authenticity comes in many forms, Stephen. Artists evolve, they grow, and they explore different sides of themselves through their work." "That's a very diplomatic answer," Colbert pressed, his voice turning condescending, an edge he usually reserved for skewering politicians. "But I wonder, do you ever worry that the public sees through what some might call a carefully constructed image? I mean, when you've reinvented yourself so many times, do you ever forget which version is the real Jennifer Lopez?" The question was loaded, and everyone in the studio could feel it. This wasn't playful banter, this was a direct attack, disguised as journalism. Lopez straightened in her seat, her performer's instincts taking over as she realized she was under fire. "I think that's a pretty unfair characterization," Lopez said, her voice pleasant but edged with steel. "Every artist grows and evolves. That's what art is about." But Colbert pressed on, suggesting that her career looked more calculated than creative, hinting that her choices from relationships to releases felt strategic. The word landed heavily, implying Lopez was manufactured, not authentic. Her smile began to crack. "I came here to talk about my music, the work I'm passionate about," she said. Colbert leaned in, sensing an opening. "The audience deserves to know what's real and what's just branding," he said. "And honestly, looking at your recent work, it's hard to tell." The audience fell silent. Lopez defended her legacy, saying she's connected with millions and that her songs come from a real place. But Colbert snapped back, accusing her of sounding like a product, not an artist. That was the moment the mask dropped. Lopez's hurt was visible, and this no longer felt like an interview, but a takedown. "Excuse me," she said quietly, her voice sharp with warning, while Colbert pushed on, seemingly blind to the storm. He was provoking. "I wonder if the Jennifer Lopez we see today is the same woman who was grinding in the Bronx," Colbert said, "or if she's become something more corporate, more manufactured." The words landed like a blow, and Lopez leaned back, staring at him with a mix of disbelief and fury. The studio turned into a battlefield, and the silence that followed was thick with tension. Finally, Lopez spoke, her voice low but laced with steel. "Stephen, I think you've misunderstood something fundamental. I didn't come here to be psychoanalyzed or have my career reduced to a PR strategy. I came to talk about my work. But Colbert, relentless, shot back. That's exactly the point. Everything you're saying feels scripted. Even your anger seems manufactured. Can you give us one real moment where you're not Jennifer Lopez the brand? The cruelty was stunning. Lopez, who'd built an empire against all odds, was being told her very identity was fake. She leaned in, eyes blazing. You want genuine? I've been in this business longer than some of your writers have been alive. I've been told I'm not Latina enough, not American enough, too young, too old, too pop, too urban. They've questioned my talent, my choices, my relationships, even my right to exist in this space. And still, I worked, created, and connected with millions. So when you suggest all of it is just an act, you're not just insulting me or dismissing everyone who's ever seen themselves in my work. Her words hit like a challenge bet. Colbert, unfazed, responded with chilling smugness. Even that speech, Jennifer, it sounds rehearsed, on brand, like something you've said to other interviewers who pushed too hard. The audience gasped. This had crossed from criticism into cruelty. And as Lopez stared him down, viewers could see her deciding whether to walk away with grace or stand her ground in a confrontation that might destroy them both. You know what, Stephen? She said, her voice dangerously calm. You're absolutely right about one thing. I am performing right now. I'm performing patience. I'm performing professionalism. I'm performing the kind of grace expected of someone in my position, even while being publicly attacked by someone who's supposed to be a host. She shifted forward in her chair, and the power in the room visibly shifted with her. But since you're so obsessed with authenticity, let me show you some. You're not asking tough questions. You're using your platform to tear me down, to humiliate someone who came here in good faith, because it makes you feel powerful. You're not fearless. You're a bully who gets off on making women uncomfortable on national television. The words struck like lightning, and for a brief second, Colbert's smug smile faltered. That's a serious accusation, Jennifer, he said, forcing composure. I'm just asking questions our viewers want answered. But Lopez didn't blink. No, you're grandstanding. You're using me as a prop in whatever narrative you're trying to craft about fame or authenticity. But here's what you don't get. You've never had to get it. When you're a woman in this industry, especially a woman of color, every word, every move is dissected. You're always too much or not enough. You sit behind that desk, crack jokes, and sleep easy, knowing your job is safe. But when you attack someone like me, question my legitimacy, my right to exist in my own career, you're not just hosting a show. You're reinforcing a system that's tried to erase women like me for decades. Her voice was steady but fierce now, no longer holding back. Colbert, unfazed, leaned back with a smirk and replied, I think you're being a bit dramatic, Jennifer. This is just a conversation. If you can't handle tough questions about your career, maybe late-night television isn't the right venue for you, Colbert said, his condescension cutting. The implication that Jennifer Lopez, a woman who had endured over 2 decades of intense media scrutiny, somehow lacked the strength to handle criticism was so insulting that even the audience began to murmur their disapproval. But he wasn't finished. If we can't have honest discussions about the manufactured nature of celebrity culture, then what are we even doing here? I'm trying to have a real conversation, and you're giving me talking points and victimhood narratives. Those last words, victimhood narratives, landed like a slap. The idea that Lopez's lived experiences of discrimination and erasure were exaggerated for sympathy revealed not just Colbert's cruelty, but his complete lack of empathy. Narratives, Lopez echoed, stunned. Stephen, do you hear yourself? I said what I said, he replied with a shrug designed to provoke. Sometimes successful people rewrite their stories to seem more relatable. It's a PR move. The room turned from tense to horrified. This was no longer an interview, but a public takedown. Lopez stared at him, something shifting in her gaze. "You know what the most authentic thing about this conversation is?" she asked, her voice ice cold. You've shown exactly who you are, someone who thinks cruelty is clever, who believes tearing down a guest makes you a real journalist. Someone with so little respect for the people who sit in that chair that you think anything you say, no matter how cruel, can be passed off as truth-telling. The pause that followed was electric. "And here's the irony. Stephen, you've been lecturing me about authenticity, but you're the one performing. You're pretending to be a fearless truth-teller, but really, you're just another man trying to diminish a woman on national television and hoping for applause." The words hit with precision, and for the first time, Colbert's polished mask cracked. The audience shifted in their seats, the silence heavy with discomfort. Some even murmured openly, breaking the unspoken rule that the host is always in control. But instead of stepping back, instead of acknowledging the damage and trying to save the interview, Colbert doubled down, his voice dripping with sarcasm as he made the fatal mistake of pushing even further. "I guess we've gone from pop star to social justice warrior," Colbert sneered. "Is this the part where you lecture me about privilege? Because Jennifer, for someone worth hundreds of millions, the oppression narrative's a little hard to swallow." The studio went silent, not just quiet, but dead still, as even the crew looked stunned by the venom in his voice. This was no longer an interview. It was character assassination. Lopez stared at him for a long moment, absorbing not just the insult, but the full revelation of who he really was beneath the mask. When she finally spoke, her voice was steady and composed, but carried more force than anything she'd said all night. "Stephen, in all my years doing this, through every tough question, I've never been spoken to like this. And what's most tragic is that you think this is journalism. You think cruelty makes you credible. But what you've actually done tonight is expose your belief that someone like me, a Latina woman who built her career from the ground up, doesn't deserve the same respect you'd offer a male or white artist." When Colbert tried to cut in, Lopez raised her hand, and he fell silent. "You've had your turn. Now it's mine. You want authenticity. I've faced dismissal, discrimination, and arrogance like yours my whole life, and I still built a career that's touched millions. I've opened doors for artists like me, while you sit behind that desk and tear people down for applause." The room was captivated, witnessing Lopez dismantle the man who had tried to humiliate her. But in a final display of stunning arrogance, Colbert sneered, "That was beautiful, Jennifer. I'm sure it'll look great on Instagram, but I'm still waiting for a real answer, instead of a press release about your journey." The contempt was thick, cruel, and personal. Lopez sat still for a beat, deciding. The woman who had come in ready to promote her work was gone, replaced by someone pushed past her breaking point. "You know what, Stephen?" she said, voice now cold and razor-sharp. "You're absolutely right about one thing. I've been performing patience, performing grace, because that's what's expected of me. But I'm done pretending. This is okay. I'm done playing the role of the polite guest while you insult me under the guise of journalism." She rose from her chair, and in that single act, the room shifted. She held the power now, while Colbert looked small behind his desk. "Jennifer, I think you're overreacting," he said, but for the first time, he sounded unsure, like he'd finally realized just how far he'd gone. "Overreacting," she repeated, her calm now far more terrifying than any outburst. "Stephen, you invited me here to promote my work, and instead, you've spent this entire interview trying to humiliate me," she said, her voice steady but firm. "You've questioned my authenticity, mocked my success, and treated me with a level of disrespect I wouldn't tolerate from anyone, let alone someone pretending to be a host." With calm, deliberate movements, she reached down and unclipped her mic. Click. The sound echoed like a verdict. What you don't understand, what you've never had to understand, is that I don't have to sit here and take this. I don't have to smile while you tear me down for entertainment. I have choices, and I'm choosing to leave. The microphone hit the table with a final thud, and the stunned silence that followed was almost deafening. Colbert sat frozen, his usual smirk gone, scrambling for control. "Jennifer, please. We can talk about your music," he stammered, his tone now raw with desperation. But Lopez just looked at him, cool, composed, and utterly in command. "You had the chance to talk about my music. You had the chance to have a real conversation. Instead, you turned this into an ambush for your own ego." She stood, gathering her purse with a grace that made the moment feel even more seismic. As she walked away, the entire studio held its breath. No one moved, no one spoke. Just before disappearing backstage, she turned one last time. "Stephen, the next time you want to talk about authenticity, try starting with the mirror." And with that, she was gone, leaving behind a room full of stunned faces and a host who suddenly looked very small. The cameras kept rolling, capturing Colbert alone at his desk, his expression a mix of disbelief and regret. What was supposed to be a routine interview had turned into a defining moment, one that audiences wouldn't forget. So now the question is, was Jennifer Lopez right to walk out? Or should she have stayed and kept trying to salvage the moment? Let us know in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe for more stories that show what really happens when the cameras are rolling and the masks come off.